Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. Did Voddie Baucham actually blame Martin Luther King Jr. for America's ruin? Or is this just a blame the black guy game? Now before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. As always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Now I came across this video. It's several years old. Actually, I think it's right around the time when Barack Obama had first gotten elected to office, or certainly not too long after. I'm not for sure of that day, but it was certainly during Barack Obama's presidency. And Voddie, out of the blue, in answer to a question, he brings up Martin Luther King. I'm going to play the clip, and then I'm going to come back and dissect it. I'm going to actually play the question in the clip. But the reason why I'm addressing this is because there is the ongoing issue of racism in the Christian church. And more so that the church is continually dealing with it in the wrong way, or addressing it in the wrong way. Now, Voddie has been an outspoken opponent of the social justice movement, or what I like to call the evangelicals' black problem. Social justice, Black Lives Matter, and the new boogeyman, critical race theory. Why does that upset and stir up the white evangelicals' feelings so? One, because of their own racism that they harbor in their hearts, in their churches, in their denominations. And people like Voddie, he targets that. He's not really trying to solve the problem, because he never addresses the issue of racism that they hold. So when he brings up Martin Luther King, I certainly was surprised. But at the same time, what you don't find Voddie talking about is, why did Martin Luther King have a purpose here? You're going to hear him totally sort of just dismiss the impact of Martin Luther King's life. The fruit of that, which, let me just say this, is the reason why Voddie is sitting on the very platform that he is partaking of, which in other times forbade him as a black man, his very denomination that he's a part of, wouldn't allow him in the churches, wouldn't allow him in the schools, wouldn't ordain him. So it's funny to me that Voddie would take aim at the man that really was used to bring liberation to him. To him. Now, as I said, I want to play the video. What you see there, this is the platform of the meeting they had. Of course, I'm not playing the entire video, but I want you to notice the men that he's with. And also, you'll see later, the audience that he is speaking to is all white. And that's important for this discussion. Let me play the question, okay, that sparked his response.
Yes. Is it possible for a born-again, blood-washed, God-fearing believer to be a liberal, progressive Democrat?
All right, that's the question. So why is he going to bring up Martin Luther King? So you heard that question. Why is he going to bring up Martin Luther King? All right, so I'm going to play his response I'm going to play his response in its entirety, and then I'll come back and unpack it.
As well, that from the perspective of the home and from the perspective of education, it doesn't take much investigation to realize that where we are as a culture has very much to do with the fact that some forward-thinking people with a multi-generational vision decided to use the educational system, make it mandatory, and make their goal the elimination of what they considered religious superstition and the establishment of a socialistic, secular human worldview. And we've seen the fruit of that. But let me tell you another thing, not just our home and our education, but there was a man who has a monument now in Washington, D.C. That man was a neo-Marxist and a socialist and a pastor and a tremendous orator, and his name was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was wrong on the gospel, and he was wrong on worldview as a liberal Marxist socialist. But he left a tremendous legacy. Among that tremendous legacy is another pastor who bought into his neo-Marxism, who is more of an open Marxist than King ever was, who has identified himself as such, who taught black liberation theology faithfully for a long time. And for 20 years, he taught that neo-Marxist black liberation theology to a man by the name of Barack Obama. And now that man is in the White House doing what his pastor discipled him to do, which was exactly what he saw modeled by the leaders in the generations before him, one of whom now has a monument in Washington, D.C. These things don't happen by accident, and they don't happen overnight.
Okay, so again, you kind of heard his response to the question, and again, I asked, why did he bring up Martin Luther King? To the question is, can you be a liberal, progressive Christian? So he kind of throws that out there. Now, I'm going to play the tape and then respond to and dissect some of his statements.
As well, that from the perspective of the home and from the perspective of education, it doesn't take much investigation to realize that where we are as a culture has very much to do with the fact that some forward-thinking people with a multi-generational vision decided to use the educational system, make it mandatory, and make their goal the elimination of what they considered religious superstition and the establishment of a socialistic, secular human worldview. And we
okay, so he says, now notice the term forward thinking. So this was the plan of Martin Luther King. This was the plan of the social justice people. How? Now, I would agree that there is a contention between the secular world and the Christian world. Okay, but we always have that. I mean, we always have that. But remember, he's going to focus on Martin Luther King. And he says that they want to put a socialist kind of ideology in the schools. But they want to do really more than that. They really want to eliminate really the Christian worldview altogether. In other words, and you're talking about a small portion of it. But remember, he's linking Martin Luther King and the social justice movement, right, that ended racism. And so by doing that, you're kind of making it bad. But let me not jump ahead here. Let's continue on.
The fruit of that. But let me tell you another thing, not just our home and our education, but there was a man who has a monument now in Washington, D.C. That man was a neo-Marxist and a socialist and a pastor and a tremendous orator, and his name was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was wrong on the gospel, and he was wrong on worldview as a liberal Marxist socialist. But he left a tremendous legacy.
Okay, so now I'll ask the question again. Why did he bring up Martin Luther King in the first place? Why? What does this have to do with the question? Okay, but he brought him up and he said that he is a Marxist. So what he doesn't say is the legacy that Martin Luther King left, and it was more than a legacy. He changed the nation, which Voddie seems to say, oh, we're against. As I said, Voddie is sitting in the very seat that he's in because of the work of Martin Luther King. Because before the work of Martin Luther King, his denomination didn't want his skin color in. But I digress. Let's say Voddie is right. Let's say that Martin Luther King was a Marxist and that what he was really seeking to do was to change the nation into a Marxist socialist country. Let's say that's true. He failed, right? And instead, what he did liberate was this nation from what? Legal racism. That's big to me. And it should be big to Voddie. But again, I digress. But let's say he's right. That he was a Marxist. Maybe he started reading Marxist books and Marxist theology and Marxist all kinds of studies and said, you know what? I'm really digging this Marxism stuff. Could you blame him? Let's just remember the nation from the time that Martin Luther King was on the civil rights fight from 1954 to his death in 1968. How did the nation treat Martin Luther King and black people? Why wouldn't they be attracted to other ideologies? Ideologies that, whether they were wrong or right, hey, they treat people better. You ever seen black neighborhoods versus white neighborhoods, the tracks that divided them? And maybe they read Marxist and said, you know what, maybe we would be treated better in a Marxist society. The I have a dream speech that white evangelicals and white conservatives love to quote, which they don't really believe. The I have a dream speech. After the government heard that speech, they labeled Martin Luther King the most dangerous man in America. Now, why is that? Because he was teaching Marxism? Because they feared he was going to destroy the nation? Or was it because he was bringing to conscience the guilt and the sin of racism that dominated this nation, that was legal at the time of the speech? And it seemed to me the same strategy. See, what the country was doing was mislabeling in order to do what? Stoke the fears of good, God-fearing white folks at the time. And isn't Voddie doing that the same right now? You're mislabeling Dr. King to stoke the fear and the guilt of people that in his own denomination harbor racism. See, tell the truth is my thing. Tell the truth. All right, let's continue.
Among that tremendous legacy is another pastor who bought into his neo-Marxism, who is more of an open Marxist than King ever was, who has identified himself as such, who taught black liberation theology faithfully for a long time, And for 20 years, he taught that neo-Marxist black liberation theology to a man by the name of Barack Obama. And now that man is in the White House doing what his pastor discipled him to do, which was exactly what he saw modeled by the leaders in the generations before him, one of whom now has a monument in Washington, D.C. These things don't happen by accident, and they don't happen overnight.
Okay, so he then ties Martin Luther King to Barack Obama's pastor, Jeremiah White. Now, Fox News during this time, during the campaign, sought to destroy Jeremiah White. And that's when I kind of fell out with Fox News and the conservative news media, because to me they showed themselves as the racists that they were. That they were building not truth, but a white Christian culture. And many believers who side with, again, Fox News, the reason why, the same product that he is accusing, that Voddie is accusing Martin Luther King of producing, Fox News produced Donald Trump. The white Christians and the white conservatives produced Donald Trump. But again, the mischaracterization and the mislabeling when they went after them shows to me what they really was about. And let me just say this: this is just nothing more than the old Southern strategy. The Southern strategy taught them well. And basically, what the Southern strategy did say was, you know what? It told white folks stop using the N-words. It told the Klan to take off their sheets, and said, you know what? You got to use more coded language. Well, they're doing the same thing here. This is what Voddie is doing. You mischaracterize a person. You don't talk about the truth. As a Christian, as a man of God, to be equitable, to be fair, God is not a respecter of persons. And instead of doing that, you're siding with one ideology when both ideologies are sinful. Both ideologies don't build the kingdom of God. Which proves what they're doing is that they're not building the kingdom of God, but they're building a white Christian culture, a white Christian nation. And that's the shame of what he's doing here. Barack Obama, when he took office from the Republican president, this nation was in shambles. And he spent the next 8 years turning this nation around. And as a Christian, if you can't admit that, if you have to lie in order to protect your ideology, you prove that it's not a godly ideology. When Barack Obama turned the nation over to Trump, this nation was in great shape. I've heard Christians say it was horrible, it was that. You're lying. And in 4 years, what did Trump do? But I digress. I won't go down that road. See, the problem with this talk, and again, Voddie has been doing this forever. Why? Because he's talking to white evangelicals who themselves have a race problem. Voddie is a Southern Baptist reform. They have been rifled with racism. They started under and for racism. The Southern Baptists started in favor of slavery, protecting slaves, and kept blacks out for years, 30 years past the passage of the Civil Rights Bill. And they still to this day wrestle with race problems within them. So when Voddie talks about, when he takes aim at Martin Luther King, he's not talking about the racism that goes on in his denomination. That's why I said, are we playing the black man is guilty, the black man did it game? But you're not talking about the other sins? That's the hypocrisy. And this is one of the reasons why, to this day, the world is laughing at white evangelicals. That's my perspective. Love to hear what you have to say or think. Add to the comments section below. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe. Subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. Till next time, I'll see you then.